I will be talking about what COVID-19 is, its global impact, and how COVID-19 affects the body. COVID-19 was declared a pandemic by the World Health Organization on 11th of March 2020. A newly discovered coronavirus that is highly infectious, which causes a respiratory disease. There are many symptoms related to having COVID-19, but the most common that is seen in vast majority of patients is fever, dry cough, and fatigue. Globally, there are approximately over 160 million cases. Of this, over 138 million have recovered, and only with 3 million deaths. This pandemic has had many global impacts. It has taken a big toll on mental health, with people having elevated levels of anxiety, sadness, fear, feeling of helplessness, and loneliness, among many other problems. In addition, economically, many businesses have gone into existential threat, leading to people losing their jobs, causing a loss of their livelihood. Finally, this pandemic has been affecting the food system and agriculture. Due to border closures and trading restrictions, farmers are unable to access markets, preventing them from selling their produce. This virus has a S-glycoprotein with two subunits, S1 and S2. The S1 subunit has a receptor binding domain. This is responsible for recognizing and binding to angiotensin-converting enzyme 2 receptor. This receptor is found mainly in the lower respiratory tract. Most patients don't have any severe complications. However, in the later stages of recovery, patients develop acute respiratory distress syndrome and multiple organ failure, which shortly results in death. It is believed that cytokine storm is a major cause of this, as cytokines play an important role in immunopathology during viral infection. It's a rapid innate immune response in a first-line defense. The problem arises when there is a dysregulated and excessive immune response, which in turn causes damage to the body. Studies have shown that there is a delayed release of cytokines in respiratory epithelial cells. These cells don't release smaller amounts of antiviral factors interferons, but a higher level of pro-inflammatory cytokine secretion. This results in a delayed response against the virus during the early stages. However, later on, the amount of cytokines released increases, attracting many inflammatory cells such as neutrophils and monocytes. The attraction of these cells results in excessive infiltration of the inflammatory cells into the lung, leading to tissue damage. Furthermore, pro-inflammatory cytokines induce apoptosis of T cells, further hindering the removal of the virus. A way to treat this is using stem cells.
Begin by covering the fundamentals of stem cells before delving into the applications. There's two unique properties which aid in specialization. Stem cells can experience self-renewal where identical copies are created. All stem cells retain the capacity to progressively differentiate into mature cell types. They also undergo differentiation in which cells divide via mitosis to create either symmetric or asymmetric pairs. This will result in specialized cells, which can be used to replace those lost or damaged by disease. Embryonic stem cells are taken from early-stage embryos and have pluripotent characteristics. Pluripotency refers to the stem cell's ability to differentiate indefinitely and to create every mature cell type, which presents it as the most unique stem cell. Within differentiation, there are many other potencies. For adult stem cells, which can be derived from any tissue and others, regardless of age, they are multipotent, which means that they are limited to creating cells found in the area of extraction. In these pluripotent cells are a new discovery where gene reprogramming of adult stem cells causes them to act in a similar manner to embryonic stem cells. This then eliminates the need for embryos. Other potencies include totipotent, found in early embryonic cells where the stem cells can differentiate like embryonic stem cells, but with the addition of producing extra embryonic and germline tissues. And unlike every other potency, there is unipotent, which can create only one type of specialized cell. Adult stem cells, there are several types such as hematopoietic, neural, and mesenchymal stem cells, to name a few. These stem cells refer to different sites of extraction and what further specialized cells will be created if they undergo differentiation. A stem cell niche is a microenvironment around stem cells that provides support and signals regulating self-renewal and differentiation. By regulating the behaviors of stem cells, it can teach us how to control them in cultures. Niche cells can act on stem cells through mechanisms such as contact, soluble factors that travel to the stem cells, and intermediate cells that communicate in between. Committed progenitors, which are intermediate cell types, are not fully differentiated cells and will divide many times and will give rise to a fully differentiated and functional cells via a series of steps. Given all the positives, there lie several drawbacks to using stem cells as a potential therapeutic. The main disadvantage of stem cell research has to do with the way that they are required, as it involves the destruction of blastocysts formed from laboratory fertilized oocytes. For those people who believe that life begins at conception, the blastocyst is a human life, and to destroy it is immoral and unacceptable. Another drawback is that we currently do not have a complete understanding of how stem cells work. Like any other new technology, it is completely unknown what the long-term effects of such an interference with nature could materialize. Embryonic stem cells and indeed pluripotent stem cells can sometimes divide uncontrollably, forming tumors and growths made out of unwanted tissue. The risk of tumorigenesis after stem cell transplantation is widely discussed in the industry. In a certain sense, stem cells can be compared to tumor cells because of their ability to proliferate after a long period of time and the resistance to apoptosis. Many components may affect the potential tumorigenesis after transplantation, including the donor's age, host tissue, growth regulators expressed by the recipient's tissue, and mechanisms that control the behavior of the stem cells at the target site.
Stem cell-based regenerative therapies were initiated recently in China, and the approval of emergency use authorization of stem cell use by the FDA for COVID-19 patients has created an excitement among the medical community. For now, there are two kinds of stem cell used for COVID-19 therapy: embryonic stem cells and mesenchymal stem cells. Both of them can be used for COVID-19 therapy, though mesenchymal stem cells are more widely used. This is because clinical use of embryonic stem cells are restricted due to a number of religious, ethical, and legal controversies. There are three potential groups of COVID-19 patients for stem cell therapy. These are critically ill young patients, critically ill older patients, and those patients who are at high risk of infection due to other comorbidities. According to recent reports, stem cells administered in a small group of severely affected COVID-19 patients showed beneficial effects. All patients in these studies showed improvement in lung function after stem cell administration. Stem cell administration may be most beneficial for older patients. This group observed the highest morbidity as the immune system and regenerative potential of these patients are compromised with advancing age and other disease. Due to a compromised immune system in such patients, antibody production takes longer, and the patient may develop the critical conditions of pneumonia and acute respiratory distress syndrome. The median time from first symptom to death in COVID-19 infection is around 14 days. This time period provides a narrow window of treatment opportunity. Autologous stem cells are often preferred for cell-based therapies. However, for active COVID-19 patients, aspiration of adipose tissue or bone marrow and subsequent isolation of cells from these tissues is not often feasible. Therefore, for active, severely ill patients, allogeneic cell sources that are being readily available seems a better treatment option. For COVID-19 patients who are at high risk of developing a severe disease, allogeneic sources of stem cells such as adipose tissue and bone marrow could be used, because for such patients, it is very important to begin treatment quickly in order to boost the immune system.
I'm here with a member of the stem cell research team to discuss COVID-19 stem cell therapy. So, Doctor, please may you explain the effect of stem cell therapy that it has on patients with COVID-19?
Yes, of course. So, as you're already aware, severely ill COVID-19 patients often experience cytokine storm. This is known in the medical field as cytokine release syndrome, and stem cell therapy effectively works by reducing this. So, most importantly, mesenchymal stem cells regulate the function of T cells in the body. T cells are a normal part of the body's response to COVID-19, but if too many of them are produced too quickly, they can produce an excessive amount of cytokines, causing severe illness by actually attacking other healthy cells in the body. So the stem cells alter the secretion of certain chemicals from T cells, which changes their overall effect from pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory.
But won't the cytokines in the patient attack the stem cells when they're being administered?
Interesting question. Actually, they don't. So it's the stem cells are immune privileged, meaning they survive the cytotoxic effects of any cytokines already in the patient's system. This means that the stem cell treatment may actually be useful even in the sickest of COVID-19 patients.
Oh, that's actually quite interesting. So this sounds like a really promising treatment. Can you tell me more about any of the drawbacks?
Yes, so at the moment, the biggest difficulty will be scaling up treatment for mass production. So obviously with the trials, we've only been working with relatively small number of patients in just a few labs around the whole world. So to roll this out worldwide will be a big logistical challenge because you'd have to freeze and thaw the stem cells in order to transport them, which may actually reduce their effectiveness. But we are researching more into this at the moment.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you very much for your time.
No problem, take care.
As previously mentioned, the stem cells can either be donated by the patient themselves, autologous, or by someone other than the patient, allogenic. After the donor is under general anaesthesia, between 0.5 and 1.5 litres of bone marrow is removed from their pelvic bones. This is the yellow marrow, which contains the mesenchymal stem cells, rather than the red marrow, which contains the hematopoietic stem cells. The exact amount extracted is determined by the concentration of stem cells found. The yellow bone marrow is then processed, and the mesenchymal stem cells are isolated from the other components of the bone marrow. The most common method of administering the stem cells is through an intravenous infusion, or an IV. Through this method, the stem cells are released into the bloodstream, where it has been shown they are able to home towards injured tissue. Injured tissue in a patient suffering from COVID is found in the respiratory system, often in the throat and lungs. The stem cells then act on this inflamed tissue and reduce the inflammation.
Whilst in lectures we touched on the law surrounding stem cells and their use in the lab, I decided to look into the broader legal implications of stem cell therapy. This led me to discover the controversial role that patents have to play in treatments for COVID-19. International patent law is largely governed by the World Trade Organization's Agreement on Trade-Related Aspects of Intellectual Property Rights, commonly known as the TRIPS Agreement. The TRIPS Agreement came into effect on the 1st of January 1995 and harmonises the minimum protection of intellectual property rights that all 164 member states must provide inventors. Article 27 of the agreement provides that patents must be available for any product or process invention, provided it is new, involves an inventive step, and is capable of industrial application. As a result, it is unsurprising that no sooner had the COVID-19 pandemic begun, patents were being awarded for stem cell therapies all over the world. Here are a few examples. The main theory supporting patents is that they incentivize innovation. They provide inventors with a period of exclusivity over an invention, usually 20 years. This period of exclusivity means that they can market their treatment without competition and charge higher prices, earning them profit. The reward of a patent allows pharmaceutical companies to continue to engage in high-cost, high-failure research and development that they otherwise could not afford. There are, however, many concerns surrounding pharmaceutical patents. The period of exclusivity effectively gives a pharmaceutical company a monopoly, and the higher prices they can charge naturally have a knock-on effect on the price healthcare providers and patients pay. Therefore, there are many concerns that the patenting of pharmaceutical treatments, including stem cell therapies, ultimately result in reduced access. You may have seen in the news recently about a waiver to the TRIPS agreement proposed by India and South Africa. The waiver proposes, amongst other points of action, that patent rights are not protected until the world's population has herd immunity from COVID-19. This waiver would allow COVID treatments and technologies, including patented stem cell therapies, to be produced generically, which would make them cheaper and more widely accessible. Of course, such an amendment to an international legal agreement requires some level of consensus, and this map demonstrates how divided states are on the proposed waiver. It's worth noting that since this graphic was produced, the Biden administration in the USA has changed its stance and now supports the waiver, though only with respect to vaccines. It's therefore looking likely if the proposed waiver does come to fruition, it won't improve global access to stem cell therapies for COVID-19. Interestingly, the second map shows when COVID vaccines are anticipated to be widely available in countries around the world. You'll notice how the second map is almost an inverse of the first. This demonstrates the phenomenon of so-called COVID-19 nationalism, whereby states that can afford patented treatments oppose the waiver to protect their strong and profitable domestic pharmaceutical sectors. I'd like to leave everyone considering whether it is equitable or ethical that there are promising stem cell treatments for COVID-19 that are almost certainly never going to be available in less developed countries.